welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
This is Jessica with Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast, and I am here with...
I am Sarah McCoy. I am an author. Do you want me to give my backlist?
Oh, please do.
I didn't know if I could stop there. I'm Sarah McCoy. I have written the most recent novel is Mustique Island that just recently came out from HarperCollins. And then I also have Marilla of Green Gables that I wrote, and The Mapmaker's Children before that, and The Baker's Daughter before that, and The Time It Snowed in Puerto Rico before that. So those are my book babies, and I'm so thrilled to be here. I love librarians. They are my people.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, you are. And I don't know if we can just talk offhand here, but I didn't have a lot of money growing up because I was in a military family. My dad was a lieutenant in the Army, and so we were stationed at various places. And one thing that all bases have, it's part of the USO program, is a library for the base, so a base library. And so I grew up going to my base library about this time every year when school let out, and just stocking up on books for the summer from my librarian, and taking them all home and coming back and switching. And I love it. So I'm so happy to be here talking to librarians. And
That's amazing. And you actually just clued me into something I didn't know existed, which I really appreciate.
And if you need a quote from an author who grew up on that and loved it, me. I love my USO. Now it's called the MWR.
M as in
Mary.
Okay.
W as in water. R as in recess.
Okay.
And that is what the organization is called now. They retooled it from the USO, which is kind of like what we remember from the 50s and 40s.
And the Mary Tyler Moore Show. So Mystique Island, please, first of all, tell us how you came about this story, because this is a real place.
Yes. Mustique Island is absolutely a real place. And I didn't know it was a real place until I heard mention of it in a BBC documentary, a DVD, because I'm so old school like that. And I was watching a DVD, and it was on Princess Margaret, the Rebel Princess. It was I think that's the actual title of it, Princess Margaret, Rebel Princess. And in it said that as a wedding gift from one of her ladies in waiting, Anne Tennant, and her husband, Colin Tennant, she was given a parcel of land on a privately owned remote celebrity island, theirs. And so and it was in the Caribbean. And I stopped there, and that caught my attention because my first book, as I mentioned in our intro, is called The Time It Snowed in Puerto Rico. I am Puerto Rican. My mother's Puerto Rican. And that first book is set in Puerto Rico in the 1960s. And I did a lot of research. Usually authors in their debut, and I'm sure you hear this a lot, the debut takes forever and we pour our soul into it. And so that book I wrote it over the course of, I think, 4 years, which was exactly how many years it's been for me to write Mustique Island. So now I'm wondering if it's some sort of like Caribbean mojo or something. But so that book I did so much research on. It was my book that I wrote during my MFA program. So I was in a residency program studying, researching, writing, and I did copious amounts of research. And I thought I knew, and this is the problem with thinking you know everything about something, anything. You don't. Just go to a librarian and they'll show you, right? They'll show you a whole stack of information that you didn't know about something you think you knew everything about. So when I saw that there was this island called Mystique Island, I'd never heard of it. And I was shocked that there was an island in my sort of Caribbean territory that I didn't know. And I felt ashamed to be truthful, I felt ashamed, like, oh, this is these are my people. I should know all the islands in this, and I have never heard of this. So of course I did what any modern historical fiction nerd does, because I am 1000% that. I Googled obsessively, like midnight Googling, to try to I don't know if you do this. I don't know if anyone out there listening does this, but sometimes when I can't sleep, I Google. And I just Google topics that are interesting or that I don't know anything about. And so I started Googling, midnight or something crazy to try to get myself to go back to sleep. And then what Google gave me was so scandalous and salacious, and no way, this is real, like news stories and newspapers and headlines about this island, and photos of Princess Margaret with her lover Roddy Llewellyn when she was still married, and Mick Jagger half naked walking on the beach. And yeah, I know that wasn't a hard one to swallow there. I was like, oh sure, we'll Google that. But all these crazy stories about swingers and the different kinds of people that were invited. And I somehow stumbled into Colin Tennant's memoir. It's called Lord of the Isle. He gave himself the title of this memoir too, Lord of the Isle.
I mean, why not?
Why not? Right? So, and it's again his story and what he wanted to be remembered and how he wanted the events to be remembered. And I believe probably 10% of this 500-page book. And I got it. I found one copy of it left in a tiny little bookstore in Somerset, UK. Ordered it. It took 3 weeks to get here. Got it. Started reading. And at the time I was, I didn't know this would be a book. So I was still playing with some other ideas and sort of I think I was actually on Marilla of Green Gables book tour. And so I was busy doing this other thing, and the book came, and then I started reading it, and wow, I realized this story and a lot of the Caribbean history has been told from a colonizing white male perspective. And that's what this was. And a lot of history is told from that same majority perspective. And I thought, it just hit me well, what's the heart though? What's the story that we don't know? And I found it literally was 2 paragraphs that were in this 500-page memoir, in which he was talking about his qualifications for the people he invited to come over to his island and possibly be residents. And his qualifications were that they were beautiful by his standard beautiful enough.
Right.
Right. And they had money. They'd be rich, beautiful, rich, and they had to have a touch of scandal. So that way they would be embracing of the activities that went on and that he wanted to have go on his island. And they wouldn't they wouldn't be prude, God forbid. So those were his qualifications. And he said that one of the residents that he invited, or a woman that he invited over to possibly be a resident, and she became one, was a woman, a real life woman, who was an ex-beauty queen from Texas, who had recently divorced her British baron husband and was subsequently blackballed from British society. And she had no place to go. And then her husband died. And so British society was like, you killed him, even though she really didn't. He died way, at least a year after she divorced him. So there was a little buffer. But she got blackballed, and then she went, and she was a gritty woman. She built her own ship with a crew, of course, but they built it together. And then she sailed the globe in it, and she had no place to go. And so Colin invited her to come because, again, she was beautiful, ex-beauty queen. She had money. She took it all from her husband, and she was scandalous. She was blackballed. So he invited her to come, and in that paragraph he said something about, oh, wouldn't it be charming to have that American Texas twang around? So she was a toy.
Right.
Wanted, right?
Yeah,
And
this is me doing my best. What is it? Dr. Evil. Right.
right. That's exactly what I did when I read
Yeah.
that. I was like, really?
Mhm.
Really? So, and that's all he wrote about her, and that she came, she bought one of his plots and she built a house called Firefly. And so I thought, okay, wow, I immediately related to this woman, and probably because I lived in Texas for 10 years. So I lived in El Paso, grit, and it gets in your soul. And there's just oh my gosh, a tenacity about once you've lived in the desert like that. And I thought, okay, she's from Texas. She's from an island, really. She's been an island in Texas. That's the way you feel. And now she's come to an island. And what does she want? She wants to belong somewhere. I knew, my point of this, Jessica, is I knew this woman. I knew her. I heard her twang. I felt her soul. And it was 2 paragraphs and a 500-page memoir. And I thought, this story has not been told and it needs to be told. And I felt that sort of voice coming out. And it was an opportunity to tell the island story objectively, because she is an outsider coming into this sort of colony of rich people, and aren't we all? Aren't most readers? We are the outsider, and we want to know what's going on in these exclusive places. We want to know.
Yeah.
And we're curious, and part of us thinks that we might even want that stuff. We want the luxury. We want, P. Diddy's little party scene sometimes. We often publicly say we don't, like, oh, I don't want that. But deep down, we kind of do. If we're honest with ourselves, we kind of want to know what that's about. And that's what these women really embody, is each of us, the individual reader, coming in as outsiders saying, I think I want this. And then once she gets accepted in, is this really what you want?
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
It's not, the glitz and the glamour ends up having a dark side, ends up requiring you to sacrifice major parts of yourself, your morality, your family. It asks for so much of you that you didn't realize when you just saw the glitz and the glamour from the outside and you wanted to get in.
Yeah.
So that's really what it is too. And it's about how you can feel like an island individually, come into a community and think that this is the community that's going to make you feel like you belong and you are included. And really, you feel even more an outsider and you feel even more excluded in that inclusivity.
Right.
And I feel like that dynamic is interesting to me. And I like things that are juxtaposed, and that you think you want something, but then once you get it, you don't want it anymore. I like that kind of conflict in characters. And so each of these characters, Willie May is the mother. She's in her mid-40s. I'm in my mid-40s, so I admit to you, I relate to her very much so.
Right.
So mid-40s, and then she has 2 daughters. One is 19, the other is 20. And she invites them over because they are drifters too. They're out in the world. They don't know where to belong. They're trying to make a name for themselves. They're trying to be known. They're trying to find their individuality. And this was also the 70s, a very glitzy time. And I feel like it mirrors a lot of right now, though, the younger generation who want to be just famous. And that's how they feel like they're known, though. It's like that. I actually have such a heart for the young people today, because I realize that what they say, when they say, I want to be famous, what they're really saying is, I want to be known. I want people to remember me. I want to be worthy of being known and being remembered by history. And that is a very deep yearning that and valid, and it should be respected. And yet, how do we show that youth, that it's so much more than that. And what you think you want at 19, when you're 40, you're going to realize that wasn't what you wanted. It was something deeper that you were looking for. And I think books are the best and most influential way of reaching that generation, and also my generation and older, seeing it for what it was and seeing what we've come through and learning from that. So, and that's really why I write historical fiction, is because I like those mirrors of present day to the past and what we learn from that collectively.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a quote that I wrote down in my notes. Everyone thinks that they want to live on a deserted island, which echoes what you were just talking about. There's a lot of, I mean, with Willie May and also her daughters, and, you know, a lot of the people who are not like the famous people who have their own issues. Everybody thinks they want a certain thing. Like Willie May really wanted to get out of Texas. So she thought that, you know, if she could get this British man to fall in love with her and marry her, that would be her ticket to happiness. And I mean, she loves their daughters so much. There's never any doubt about that. But you know, she realizes that, you know, like the courtship was her courting him as somebody else. She was very conscious of what she was emulating, like the starlets, when they met. And now she's just figuring out a way to be. And she comes to this place where it's just wild and crazy and not at all, you know, like a place where you can't, it's like it's meant to be
genuine, right? You can't find your genuine self and be your genuine self when everything is a show.
Exactly.
And everything is for someone else's viewing, not for yourself.
Right.
Yeah. And that's exactly, I think we all, and again, I feel like it definitely mirrors right now where we all kind of do that. Not me right now with you, because you got me all natural right now.
Right, of course. Well, but you know, I mean, it echoes just in general how a lot of things have changed. I mean, we use a lot more video when we're doing things for social media here, and you know, a lot more pictures, and it's very difficult to get away from influencer culture when that's really how you get the word out. So you know, you need to embrace it to a degree, whether or not it's your natural state. But I thought that just like Willie May's relationship, both to like the people who lived on the island versus the whole entourage of folks, was very interesting. You know, she formed a relationship with Ava, and you know, and then she brought her own daughters over who had their own things going on. It was a real interesting, it was like a tale of two islands in a way.
Yes, and that was very important for me to bring, to sort of you have all the bubbling sort of, it's like making cheese, right? You've got all the stuff that rises to the top, and that's the good stuff. And I wanted to bring those minority characters to the surface, the cream, you know. I wanted to bring them up and give them their story. So yes, you've got Avon, you've got Titus, who is a business manager of the island and really is the one running the show, because Colin, and this is true of his memoir, had no idea how to handle money. He just spent it. I mean, literally he walked onto the island and said, I'm going to buy everything, which is in itself crazy, right? That in the late 60s, someone could walk, or not walk on, fly on, and say, I want to buy this island, and I'm going to buy all the industry that's on it, which was cotton, and I'm going to buy all the people that are working on it. Basically, I'm going to buy everything. So I own everything now. And that's very 1492.
Yes. Except without the buying, you know,
yes.
like, which is still also terrible. but like that whole conquistador
Yes.
colonialism. You
Yeah.
hit the nail on your head, like, oh well, I'm gonna come in and I'm white and I have money and I own this now and I own you and I own you and
Now you're gonna be my servants, which is just nuts. And so the fact that he got away with this in the late 60s into the 70s, I had to tell that story, especially as a Puerto Rican woman. I felt like you have to tell this story and you have to tell it from your people. Like, even though they're not the main characters, I feel like they are the beating pulse of this book. And I wanted them to be. I wanted them to be this sort of quiet but necessary powerhouse, like a heart, like pumping the blood through. Like, you can't have it without us. You can't, without us, this whole thing dies. So I that was something that was super important for me. And I love those characters so much, those minor characters. And they are really in the book, the dynamic force of change for all of the major characters, Willie May, Hilly, and Joanne. They are the force of change. And so that was really fascinating for me, and I was nervous to dig into that. I really was, but I'm glad I did. And it was really, it changed me as a person, as an author, when I wrote that from their perspective. So yeah, but also, Jessica, this is a beach read. This is my attempt at a fun, floaty, and even though, like it has weight and grit to it.
Yes.
But I think so does the beach. You go to the beach and you're laying there and you're loving it. And yet sometimes there's the threat of getting sunburned, and there's sand in your feet and it's gritty and you get
sometimes
sweaty.
Your bathing suit.
Yes.
And your egg salad and your chicken salad.
Yes, like the beach, I wanted it to be all inclusive, that perfect beach read where it's floaty and you love it, and at the same time you're kind of a little uncomfortable. And
when you come home from the beach, as lovely as the beach is, you kind of have that weird, like almost like dried out, hollowed out feeling. Like you're happy, but then at the same time you feel almost like hungover because you're not really
you feel like you
hours more.
Like you got like a little inebriated or something, and now you're kind of shaking your head off and thinking, okay. And that is so Mystique Island, is that you go and you're, oh my gosh, this is amazing and wild, and we're partying and this is so fun. It's the 70s, and then I wanted there to be this grit of understanding and learning, and I wanted people to come away feeling a little bit sunburned in a way that it's like, what did I just experience? I'm not going to forget this. This is going to stay with me. That's what I wanted with this book. I wanted it to be a beach read that
with some real substance.
That stays, right. That really
not to knock beach reads, but it's a real heady beach read, I think, is the way that I would describe it. And you really do get the sense of being away on Mystique. And by the way, your cover is beautiful. Everything about it, it's a real good doorway into the book, because it has that film of like 1970s, when you see pictures from the 70s, but it feels like an island that you just want to sit down on that beach and sort of take in everything that's going around you, which Willie May definitely does.
Yeah, and I wanted the cover. This was a stickler for me. I did not want another, God bless it, because all my other books, yes, I get it. I did not want another woman with her back turned, looking over her shoulder, or a side profile, or some like demure or something. I'm like, no, I want something that just smacks people like, this is it. Come or go, but here it is. And I feel like it's exactly what you said. You put it perfectly. It's like a window. It's like, here it is. You can step through onto this island, it's waiting, like here's the island. This is come.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted. I wanted it to be much more like realistic too. That's an actual photograph that they just sort of, zhuzhed a little. I mean, I loved this. And it was between, if we can talk about covers for a minute, but I know most people love talking about covers. This was one of 9 designs I got, and they were different beach photos. And a couple of the other ones that my editor actually really, really liked were like beach sunsets, and they were all pink. Everything was all pink. And I was just, I want this to be something that is not like, not that it's not feminine, but I want it to be bold. And so I said, my favorite color happens to be blue, and like a blue teal. That is my favorite color. So if you notice,
mine too.
is it like a turquoise?
You get green and you get blue, and it's the best of both worlds.
Is the best of both worlds. So this cover is my blue, my green, yes, I'm an island girl, so maybe that's it. I don't know. But I said, I want this photo. I want this one. I don't want the pink sunsets, please, So I kind of fought for this. And when you do that as an author, there is always sort of the threat that if it doesn't do well or people don't like it, it's your fault. It is the author's fault, because they chose it. So I was a little worried about that. And luckily, once they released the cover, everyone, I'm so grateful, really loved it. And the reviews I know we shouldn't read them, but the reviews from booksellers have meant, and from librarians, oh my God, have meant the world. That word of mouth. And that's where I feel like it's a little different for librarians, because you all have people who come in and say, we know you're not just trying to sell us something. What do you actually recommend? And so, for my taste and my pleasure and my summer, and that you cannot beat it. And so hearing from librarians that they love Mustique Island and they're recommending it to book clubs and they're recommending it to these huge groups of readers. I mean, I can't tell you how much it means to me. It means the absolute world.
Thank you. I like to consider librarians the original book influencers.
Yes.
Right? Because that's sort of what we do and what we have done. Have you read this book? Right. Look at this book. You can't see because we're not using video, but I'm gesturing at an imaginary book. But Sarah, this has been such a delightful conversation. Really quickly before we go, are you working on another book for next year?
Not for next year. No, I am not a book a year girl. I am such a crock pot writer. Like you heard, I get an idea and then it stews. Yeah. So right now, yes, just like when I was on tour for Marilla of Green Gables, I was stewing on this Mystique Island. So I'm on tour for Mystique Island, probably for the next year. And I'm also stewing on something. But what I can tell you, I haven't told anyone this. No one is like, I just have been like, when they ask about my next book, I'm like, I keep it pretty secret. But it is definitely similarly in this, I'm going forward into this sort of more contemporary. I don't know if you would call the 70s contemporary. I do because I have
born in the 70s.
Yes, I was going to say, right? I have t-shirts that are that old. So for me, it is contemporary, but they say, I guess, 50 years. And if it's 50 years in the past, then they call it historical fiction. But I'm definitely keeping in this sort of 70s, 80s, 90s realm. I'm not going back. My agent said, okay, so just to clarify, you're not going back to hoop skirts. I was like, I'm not going back to hoop skirts. I like this vibe. It feels very me right now, very hip, very, I think one of the people who has really been such a good help and very, very encouraging of me and is Taylor Jenkins Reid. And I like her work. I like that sparkle it has, that sort of readership that feels modern, even though it's got a lot of historical bent to it. And so I think that's the future for me, is that whatever that shelf is, genre wise, Not that we need any genre names on stuff,
Right.
but whatever that is, I feel like that's where I feel comfortable going next to.
Thank you so much for this. This was a delight. And I've learned so much from just chatting with you. Mystique Island, again, a heady beach read. And it will definitely leave you with that feeling when you're done with it. It was so beautiful. Thank you for sharing all of this with us. So once again, this was Jessica with Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. Our guest today was
Sarah McCoy.
And we are going to close this chapter of Turn the Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.